All right, everyone, the time has finally come. The biggest patch in Diablo 4 history is finally here, and we're going to go over it. Let's not waste any time. We got new unique items, legendary aspects, 6 new unique items. The first one's an uber unique staff. Gain a random shrine effect 10 to 20 seconds after killing an elite enemy. Can only occur once every 30 seconds. This seems pretty good. I guess we'll have to see the actual stats on it because that really changes things a lot. But, I mean, uber unique that gives you a shrine power. We've seen this effect in Diablo 3 and how strong that can be. But uber uniques are big memes, so, I doubt anyone's ever going to even get that, basically. Barbarian, Azarath, lucky hit. Your core skills have a 20% chance to freeze enemy for 3 seconds and deal cold damage to them. This is actually pretty cool. I will say lucky hit with core skill with a chance. Little awkward, and also, again, the stats. But this kind of reminds me of like whirlwind, freeze type builds with the Barbarian. Could have something going there. Honestly, I'm not well enough versed in the Barbarian to tell you whether or not this is going to be a meta item, but could be interesting. I really don't like lucky hit with core skills though. Druid, Flesh Render, Debilitating Roar, and Blood Howl deal damage to nearby poison enemies. This actually seems pretty good. The only problem I see, once again, is that these uniques need to have good stats, and dealing damage to nearby poison enemies, not a big deal. This could be a pretty good amount of damage, but it needs to be like within the millions to be like worthwhile, or like hundreds of thousands at least. Debilitating Roar is used mainly for the damage reduction, right? Blood Howl also just mainly used for ramping up your build and making things synergize. So I don't really see how just dealing a little bit points of damage. I'm guessing these are rated for like the lowest possible number. But even scaled to like mass amounts, I really don't see this doing insane amounts of damage. But I guess we'll have to see. Necromancer, Lidless Wall. I'm pretty excited for this. When you have an active Bone Storm, hitting an enemy outside of a Bone Storm has a 5 to 25% chance to spawn an additional Bone Storm at their location. Each of your active sacrifice bonuses increases the chance by 25%, and the total number of additional Bone Storms you can have is +1. Okay, yeah, so when we lucky hit, we have a 25% chance plus the active sacrifice bonus means it's 100% chance, I'm guessing, to spawn a Bone Storm on a lucky hit, meaning that you're basically going to get a Bone Storm every lucky hit, every Bone Storm activation, which is pretty strong. But all I'm seeing here is additional options for the bone builds, which is not what they needed at all. And also, it's a shield. So who knows if that's even going to be useful. That is the unique shield. If it has really good stats, maybe, but shields are generally not something you want to go towards because they're inherent bonuses just to give you more defensive options. And the Necromancer is all about pumping super high DPS to make the build work. But perhaps this breaks into a new meta where bone defensive builds. We'll see how big the nerfs are to Bone Spear, I'm guessing, to see if this is even worthwhile. Rogue, Eagle Horn, a penetrating shot has a 30 to 80% chance to fire an arrow that bounces off walls and scenery. Hitting enemies from behind with penetrating shot will make them vulnerable. That's a really cool unique. Actually a really cool one. I just don't know how viable the ricochet effect will be, and whether or not it's actually going to do a ton for us. I imagine actually out of all the uniques here, this looks the most promising for the penetrating shot build, I will say. So there's that. Sorcerer here. The Oculus. Gain the effect of the teleport enchantment for free. When you evade using teleport enchantment, you are taken to a random location. Oh boy. Gaining the effect of the teleport enchantment is pretty powerful. But the fact that it takes you to a random location is kind of awkward. So I guess we'll see how good that one is. This one I don't know about, guys. And also here, the Azarath and Flesh Render have a base damage or a flat damage effect up to 6,700 damage. That just seems bad to me. I don't know. That seems pretty bad to me. I don't see this being useful. Maybe I'm completely wrong here, though. 7 new legendary aspects. This also gets pretty exciting as well. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in these aspects, and then as we get into the bug fixes and such, I'm going to kind of just go through them pretty quickly because those ones are less important in terms of like the actual effect of the patch notes, and I'll leave a link to this if you guys want to check those out. But New legendary aspects, Audacity. When there are 5 close enemies, stun them for 2 to 4 seconds. This can only occur every 20 seconds. It's actually a pretty powerful utility aspect. I can see this being useful very, very often on a lot of melee options. Craven, you gain 20 to 40% increased movement speed when moving away from slowed or chilled enemies. This seems very good, actually, for any sort of Penitent Greaves ranged option. Sorcerer, I could see this being useful. Necro Bone Spear, at least for the current iterations of these builds, being useful. Penetrating Shot Rogue, Rapid Fire Rogue, so many different options when you're moving away, or even, let's say, melee builds if you're running Penitent Greaves or have some consistent slow. Hitting someone and then running past them in the dungeon can actually be very, very useful. So Craven, actually a very promising general aspect here. Barbarian Ancestral Charge. Charge calls forth 4 ancients who also charge, dealing 50 to 100% of normal damage. Wow, that actually makes charge an interesting ability. I very much like this. I think it's pretty cool. Wow, I actually really like this aspect. I don't know if it's going to be particularly great because it really has you kind of slot in charge. And unless they make significant changes later on, this aspect I don't see will get some play because it is an offensive aspect and you need all those slots. Druid, Subterranean, Poison Creepers active, also casts Landslide in a circle around you. Earth skills deal 10 to 20% increased damage to poison enemies. Wow, this seems super strong for Earth. Like eventually even Trample Slide builds, we could have some modification running Poison Creeper. I used Poison Creeper with Landslide earlier on into the Druid career. This has a lot of promise. Getting a 20% damage, increased damage to poison enemies is massive. And then also getting a guaranteed landslide while Poison Creeper is applying that poison is super powerful. So I actually really like Subterranean here for the Druid. I think this offers a lot of options here. Gore Quills, offensive for Bloodlands, will consume Blood Orbs to also conjure lances from them. Each additional Blood Lance deals 50% abnormal damage and prioritizes targeting unlanced enemies. Interesting. I actually, in my video earlier today, mentioned that Blood Lance needs some sort of AoE option, and this is kind of an AoE option. I really like this. I think this is pretty cool, but I don't know if this really brings up Blood Lance enough to be a reasonable speed farming build. It is build defining, I will say that. The problem is, I don't know if it's good enough. We'll see. Rogue, Pestilent Points. Every third cast of Puncture is poison imbued with 100 to 150% of normal potency. That's crazy, guys. My initial impression is that's crazy. Wow. Poison would be with such a core piece of all the different builds out there, and Puncture is also a core piece of all the different builds out there. I could see this being massively important for keeping up poison effects, like decreasing the damage you take, increasing your attack speed, various different things. It could be that this is actually just good damage as well. So I'm very excited to see this aspect in effect. Right now, I guess I'll go over the Sorcerer before I go over my overall opinions on these. But the Searing Wards, after spending 200 to 100 mana, your next Firewall is free to cast and will destroy incoming small missiles. Wow, so this aspect just makes it even more firmly positioned to what it will be, which is that it's a very good pushing / hardcore build, making you extremely survivable, destroying, like, I'm guessing this means like arrows shooting through, it's going to destroy those. That's really, really massive and really, really powerful. Also giving you a free Firewall is going to be a big deal. This doesn't change anything though. It's still going to be a bad speed clearing build in terms of that option, but in terms of like buffing up what it was already good at, yeah, it does exactly that. So what are my overall thoughts? Well, I'm not very impressed with the uniques yet. We'll see. It really depends on their stats because, you have to have the good stats with it. I would say the most promising one's probably the Rogue one in terms of the build that it's good for, or perhaps the Lidless Wall here for the Necromancer. I could see the Barbarian, being really, really good. Although it is a unique sword, which tends to be a little bit worse, in my opinion. But the chance to freeze enemies could be very, very good. As for aspects, I really like the Druid one. The Druid one's probably the strongest one. The ability to get that increased damage to poison enemies, any increased damage like that is huge in this game, and getting a free landslide on Poison Creeper. The only problem with this is that you kind of do want landslide and Poison Creeper in your build. However, this could be good enough to where you just use it for the 20% damage to increase poison enemies. That's how good this is. Necromancer could be interesting. I think the next one, as for like really solid, is the rogue one, because puncture is in like 99% of your builds at the current moment, unless they change it. Moving on to bug fixes here, they've made a lot of fixes. Little things with dungeons, little like random issues. A lot of things have just been in general fixed, which is pretty important. I will go over the Barbarian ones. There were like some options with Hammer of the Ancients dealing a ton of damage. This is going to be a decrease to the build, as they mentioned. So I'm not sure how powerful Hammer of the Ancients will be now. Maybe they buffed it, maybe they nerfed it. I think that's important to note. Also, the Druid Earth skills and Pulverize skill will no longer consume 2 overpowered buffs. That was pretty annoying, pretty bad, to be honest. But also, I believe they fixed the bug with Bulwark. I actually don't see where they mention it, but they fixed the tornadoes not dealing damage. That's pretty important. And Stormclaw's aspect allowed Shred to do extreme amounts of damage. I'm not really seeing any Bulwark changes, but perhaps they did. I'm not seeing it here, but that's a pretty important one. Necromancer, nothing too important, I guess. The Bone Spear cast through Chilling Wind is pretty important, because when you cast it through that shield, the little ice freeze wall or whatever, it would slow down and not do as much damage. Rogue here, nothing too important, I guess. Dash skill will not go for the full distance. Nothing too important there. And then Sorcerer, the Firebolt enchantment would not contribute to the combustion key pass. It's pretty important, actually. Other than that, nothing too crazy. I guess they fixed the Incinerate bug, but it is what it is. Lots more bug fixes, crazy amounts of bug fixes. I will just drop this down below so you guys can read through all the bug fixes, because we will be here for a long time. Now, gameplay updates. Altar of Lilith unlocks are now count-wide. As I mentioned earlier to someone in the comment section, these things are on count-wide, so you're going to get the stats as well as the renown for your entire account. Map discovery is now account-wide. Whispers will no longer reward sigil dust. Overall loot quality has been significantly improved for silent chests. Channel time for leave dungeon ability has been increased from 3 to 5 seconds. That's a little unfortunate. I guess they're trying to nerf repeat dungeons. We have generally reduced the tendency for many monsters to move around in combat. Okay. So overall, these two are pretty important. And 2 things about this: you're going to need to log into your character with the most progression on it in order to unlock it for the new season. So do that right now, because the patch is live, okay? World tier, bonuses to world tier. World tier 2, monsters now drop 50% more items. Bonus goal has been increased to 20%. Level scaling inside Dungeons and Monsters, most overall territories have been adjusted in World Tiers 3 and 4. Monsters will begin to trail behind the player in level after a certain point. This change does not affect world bosses, Legion events, Fields of Hatred, Helltide, or Nightmare dungeons. Okay, what this means is normal dungeons and open world activities are even less valuable to do, and Nightmare dungeons and Helltide zones and all that stuff are even more important to do. The World Tier 2 changes, though, are pretty massive. World Tier 3 example: if the player's level is below 55, the monster's level is 55, 56 to 60, monster level is 55, 61 is 56. Okay, that makes sense. So because the World Tier 3 starts at 50, you have the monster start at 55, I guess, or it scales up to 55, and then at that point it's going to trail 5 levels below you if you're past level 55. Or I guess you say past level 60. Same thing with World Tier 4 starting at level 80. Experience. Reward experience for killing Whispers in World Tier 3 and 4 has been significantly increased. We have observed that experience bonus rewards for killing high-level monsters escalates too fast when compared to the relative challenge involved. Okay, so this one right here, I guess maybe Whispers are going to be massively important. I'll have to test it for you guys. I'm guessing it's still not going to be good enough compared to Nightmare Dungeon farming, but we'll see. We are adjusting bonus experience rewards for killing monsters at a higher level than the player. Pre-season was 15, 20, 25. Post-season, 1.5% bonus per level up to 10 levels. Okay, so this is pretty important because this changes the strategy drastically. This means that, running, let's say, strongholds are going to be less valuable. Not to say that they're going to be worse than normal dungeon farming, but they're going to be less valuable because they're not going to get the straight up 25% or 20% because it's 2 levels higher immediately. And instead, it's just going to be 3% bonus experience, which is going to change things drastically. And also, when you farm Nightmare Dungeons, it needs to be 10 levels higher now instead of 3 levels. And also, it's going to be less, which is pretty unfortunate because that means less XP. They claim that there's going to be more XP this season, but actually, so far, it's going to be less XP because, again, 25% bonus versus 15% bonus is a pretty big difference. We're also adjusting experience rewards for monster levels offsets for higher world tiers. Current world tier level offsets up to 3, up to 10, up to 100. Okay, that's the current world tier level offsets. And we are changing this to +3, +6, +10. For example, your friends bring you to World Tier 4 and leave you at the entrance of dungeon. They start killing level 100 monsters. Prior to season ability, you get level 100 monster XP times 1 + 25. Okay. So this just removes power leveling, essentially, to some degree. When you were running World Tier 4, you would get monster levels that were level 70, right? Because that was like the base level. And if they did, let's say, a Nightmare Dungeon, you would even get further XP bonuses. Now, they basically reduced that significantly. And I'm guessing that you have to do Nightmare Dungeons now. I don't know if they've changed that. But in terms of just World Tier 4 farming, it's going to be a lot harder to power level. So I think you could still do it in Nightmare Dungeons, but I'll have to confirm that. Helltide Zones are now 3 levels higher than the player instead of 2. Okay, that's pretty nice. Tortured Gifts and Mysteries had its cost increased to 250. Why? Why? Oh man, that sucks. That makes Helltide Zones way more miserable to farm, in my opinion. All right. Okay. Lots of changes. Lots of changes. We have lots of changes to the general changes, and wow. Okay. I guess we have to dive into the patch notes for each different class now. First, let's go over the general ones. Aspect of Disobedience, maximum stacks reduced from 100 to 60. So they nerfed Aspect of Disobedience. That's a big survivability nerf. Huge survivability nerfed. Sucks. Aspect of Retribution, bonus damage to stun reduced from 20 to 40 to 10 to 20. Okay. Exploiter's Aspect damage, bonus damage to Unstoppable reduced. Starlight Aspect Restore increased. Okay. I think the biggest one is Aspect of Disobedience. This is used on 90, 99, maybe 100% of builds at this point. And I think it's still going to be used, but it's a huge nerf to it. Wow, that's a big nerf. Items, Butcher Cleaver, slow increase. They dropped, or the rate has been adjusted for drop rates. I guess that's pretty nice. I don't really care too much about the Butcher's Cleaver. Monsters, increased monster HP scaling from 85 to 100%. Bonus per extra player in a party. Okay, so they're nerfing group play. Just the scaling of Greed Shrine improve its effectiveness. World bosses now drop potions, and there is, or more often, I should say, there's no longer a limit on how many materials you can refine into higher materials. That was a dumb cap. I don't know why they had that in the game. Looks like there are many affixes are too efficient and are shouting alternatives. We're looking to refine the outliers, improve the number of meaningful choices, and increases the overall flexibility of items. Okay, they better be buffing some if they're going to nerf some of ours, though. We're increasing the availability of affixes to below to make them easier to include in different builds. Controlled impaired duration reduction can now appear on pants. That's actually kind of nice. Barrier generation can now appear for all classes. Lucky Hit Chance while you have barrier can now appear for all classes. Mastery skill damage newly added can appear on sorcerer weapons, scale identically to core skill damage. Can now appear on shields, resistance to all elements. Okay, that's kind of nice. Looks like the core stat bonus on weapons has been overperforming. So strength 50% stronger on weapons, 25% stronger. Oh wow, so they're nerfing the overall like main stat. That kind of sucks. Okay. Cooldown reduction affixes often felt mandatory due to the raw power. Looks like they're going to reduce it by 30% for imbuement trap and cooldown reduction. Wow, that's a big reduction. Critical strike damage and vulnerable damage often viewed as a hard requirement. So they're going to reduce both those. Oh boy. Vulnerable damage reduced by 40%. Jeez. Guys, we need to see some buffs here sometime in the future because this is like hard nerfing everything in the game by a lot. Cooldown reduction inherent on offense reduced. Critical strike damage inherent on swords reduced. Vulnerable damage reduced by 65% on crossbows. Jeez, that's a huge nerf for like rogue. Oh no, this is like crazy hard. Oh my goodness. Damage to crowd controls enemies decreased. Damage to foes enemies increased. And then they've gone ahead and frequently slaughter monsters many levels above their own. We want to support this, but the current situation is beyond what we believe is correct. We're shifting the power to many offensive affixes from defensive affixes. We know this will make our endgame content more deadly. Okay, I get why they did this because people were one-shotting by like Uber Boss, but still, Nightmare Dungeon Tier 100 was still very difficult for the vast majority of the player base, which I guess is what they want. Now they've increased basically all of the various damages, like physical damage, lightning damage, damage while this, damage while that, etc. And they also reduced total armor, damage reduction. Oh, that's gross. This is terrible. Guys, I know people wanted to reduce perhaps the damage in the game. They just straight up nerfed everything. Everything that was strong in the game, they nerfed, and they buffed things that really hardly do anything. Like increasing your physical damage by 25%. This is not a big enough buff to want you to have this over vulnerable damage and cooldown reduction and all these stats they wanted to nerf. This is basically just a straight up nerf. They did not buff anything. They did not give us more options. They just nerfed the ones that we had, as far as I can see so far. So there needs to be some major buffs in terms of classes in order for this to be super good. Let's go into the barb first, I guess. Violent double swing vulnerable duration increased. That's a pretty nice thing for double swing. Furious upheaval damage bonus per stack increased. They did reduce this way back when, but now they're increasing it again. I don't think that's enough for the upheaval build to be good enough, but we'll see. Power charge cooldown reduction is now capped to 3 targets for a maximum of 9 seconds. That's pretty nice. Ground stop fury gain increased. Enhanced death blow damage to bosses increased from 100% to 150%. That's a pretty big one. It's a pretty big increase. Steel Grass vulnerable duration increased from 2.5 to 3 seconds. Enhanced rupture damage increased. Warriors rupture attack speed increased. Fighters rupture healing increased. Okay, so they just buffed rupture. They buffed death blow. They buffed a lot of fury generation. This doesn't really change a whole lot of things, I would think. I think the most promising buff here, or the two most promising buffs, are the enhanced death blow and the vulnerable duration increasing. Perhaps the upheaval damage bonus is actually pretty massive. I like the death blow increase though. Death blow was smacking pretty hard, and maybe there's some sort of option to run with death blow. Hamstring now only slows healthy enemies, and slow amount increased. Oof. Cut to the bone, bleeding damage bonus to vulnerable enemies reduced. Oof. Big nerfs here. Hamstring nerfs are huge. This is a huge nerf to Barb. Wow. Oh man. Oh. Wow, that's a big nerf. This basically means you can't perma CC and get all the bonuses from damage to CC enemies and options like that. Wow. Wrath's bonus now affects all damage instead of just core skills. That's a pretty nice one. Relentless Berserker aspect duration increased. Battleman aspect Berserking duration increased. Brawler's aspect damage increased. Aspect duration increased. Aspect of the Iron Warrior damage reduction increased. Oh man. Oh man. I have a feeling that the builds that we had seen before are just hard nerfed because of the hamstring nerfed. There's going to be some more options. Maybe Berserking is a new option for Barbarian. Wow, these are big nerfs though. Wow, that's like I don't understate how massive the hamstring nerf was. That's a big nerf. But they also, I guess, increased Gore's devastating grips, and its hit cap has been removed and now explodes every 2 seconds. That actually could be a big, meaningful thing for Whirlwind, so I'm interested to see that. Overall, I think the Barbarian just got some pretty big nerfs to the builds that were already good, and overall, Hamstring was going to be basically useful on every build, so it's just a hard Barb nerf, and then I don't think the buffs are good enough to bring those builds up to where the other builds were. Druid. Enhanced claw attack speed bonus increased, storm strike damage reduction reduced. That's a big nerf. That's a big nerf. Storm strike damage reduction. That was a huge way to keep Druid alive. Trample spirit gain increased. Boulder damage increased. Last strike healing increased. Cataclysm damage increased, and tornado damage increased. Cataclysm vulnerable duration increased. Prime cataclysm duration increased, and Grizzly Rage now grants unstoppable for 6 seconds. Okay, so that's actually a pretty big nerf. First off, I would actually say that's probably the biggest one so far. You don't have permanent unstoppable, although it's pretty close still. And then a lot of just baseline increasing. This is pretty big buffs. I would say overall, the big nerfs are Storm Strike, Grizzly Rage. The big buffs, arguably the Cataclysm lightning damage here, Claw attack speed perhaps. Pretty, I would say bigger nerfs than there were buffs for sure. Provocation threshold required for guaranteed overpower reduced. Okay, that's nice. Spirit Boon, Masochist now also requires a lucky chance of 75%. Prickle Skin Thorns increased. Iron Feather maximum life increased. Bolster Fortified increased. And Overload damage increased. Okay, so Masochistic, pretty big nerf, I would say. But the other ones, I guess, that are buffing some survivability aspects. Spirit Glyphs bonus now affects all damage instead of just core skills. That's pretty nice, just like the Barb. And they also, looks like they increase the aspect of Calm Breeze. Maximum Spirit, aspect of the Tempest increase. Skinwalker's aspect healing increased. Symbiotic aspect cooldown reduction reduced. Stampede bonus increased. And Shepherd's damage bonus increased. So, and also Insatiable Fury skill ranks increased. And Mad Wolf's Glee Werewolf skill ranks increased. So overall, just pretty nice buffs for the Druid, I would say. Overall, I guess the symbiote, I read that wrong. The damage reduction is reduced. Okay, so the symbiotic aspect is reduced. That's kind of unfortunate. But overall, I would say the Druid got a better shakeup than the Barbarian by a long margin. They did get the Unstoppable basically permanent reduced, and Storm Strike damage reduction is a pretty massive deal, but not as bad as the Barb. Moving on to the Necromancer. Ooh, Necromancer has some big changes here. Skills, Initiates, Decompose Slow increased. Paranormal Sever casts required for vulnerable reduction reduced. That's pretty nice. Enhanced Blood Surge healing increased. Bloodlet's damage reduction for piercing has been reduced. That's pretty nice, actually. A little bit of additional damage from Bloodlands. Bone Prison initial Essence Generation increased. That's actually a nice buff as well. Essence Generation is going to be pretty important. Abhorrent Iron Maiden healing increase. Golems move faster and unhindered. Supreme Blood Wave leaves behind Blood Orbs. That's nice. Ray Skeleton, Corpse Explosion, Corpse Tendrils range for auto-targeting has been increased. Ooh! That's actually the biggest buff I would love to see. That's a huge quality of life buff, guys, for those of you that are on mouse and keyboard. Ray Skeleton Priest bonus damage increased, and their healing has also been increased. Okay, so a little bit of blood build buffs and skeletal buffs. This is the thing I'm most excited about. Out of everything I've read out of this patch note, that's probably the one thing I'm most excited about so far. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's a huge change, guys. Passives: Evulsion damage bonus to vulnerable reduced. Okay, minor nerf there. Transfusion minion healing increased. Drain of Vitality lucky hit chance increased, and amplified damage increased. Okay, so no bones build nerfs quite yet, besides this one here, which is a decent nerf, but not a huge one. Book of the Dead. Necromancer's minions will now automatically resummon after respawning during a world boss fight. Skeletal Warrior defenses upgrade Thorns Inherited increased from 40 to 50. Skeletal Mage upgraded tanks required for additional Shadow Bolt reduced from 5 to 4. Bone Skeletal Mage upgrade Fortify amount increased from 11 to 20, and Iron Golem's upgrade attacks required for Slam attack reduced from 5 to 4. So the Book of the Dead changes are nice. I would really like to see some sort of summoner aspect changes in order for this to really pop off, but I would say the coolest one are the Skeletal Warrior Thorns Inherited. I've seen some really cool Summoner Thorns builds that are pretty nice. Summoners aren't bad, they're just not good is right now. Essence Glyph now affects all damage instead of core skills. Nice. And here we go. Here are the nerfs. Splintering Aspect Bone Shard damage bonus reduced from 50 to 100 to 30 to 60. how that's a big nerf already. Aspect of Plunging Darkness, bonus damage increased. Okay, Coldbringer's aspect Blizzard cooldown reduced. Aspect of Hungry Blood, chance to fire Blood Lance increased. Blood-soaked aspect damage increased. Aspect of Ultimate Shadow damage increased. Aspect of Grasping Veins, critical strike damage bonus reduced. Ooh, that's a big nerf as well. Osseous Gale aspect bonus Bone Storm duration increased. Aspect of the Damned damage bonus increased. Bloodbathe aspect Echo damage reduction. Oof. Aspect of Reanimation Skeletons damage bonus increased. Okay, so massive nerf to Bone build now. There is a huge nerf, about a 40% reduction in effectiveness for the Splintering Aspect Bone Shard, which is arguably the one that you put on your two-hander if you're going to use a two-hander, which means that it's even twice as hard the nerfs are. Grasping Veins, critical strike damage bonus is a huge reduction. That one was basically core to grouping up everyone and one-shotting them. So two pretty big nerfs. Grasping Bane's critical strike damage bonus reduced is just big for the Necromancer in general. But they did buff some of the darkness builds, and they did buff some of the other things with Bloodlands. I just don't think these buffs are meaningful. Like, they nerf Bone Shard by 40%, and then they buff, like, Bloodlands. I guess it's by, like, 30%, so I guess I should... Well, no, not quite. Well, like, 12%, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's not even close to the same. 40% versus like 12%. Or like here, they buffed it by 25%, Plunging Darkness. I don't know. I feel like they could be more generous with the buffs, seeing as how crazy big nerfs were coming in for the Necro. Oh, I don't know, guys. I think the build's still going to be good. I think it might arguably still be one of the best builds for the Necromancer. Moving on, though, we have the Rogue, the one I've been waiting for the entire time. Advanced rapid fire duration increased from 3 to 5 seconds. Pretty nice. Caltrops cast speed increased by 15%. Enhanced cold imbue lucky hit chance increased. Enhanced smoke grenade damage bonus increased. Methodical dash maximum cooldown reduction increased. Concealment stealth duration increased. Enhanced dark shroud chance to not be consumed increased. And supreme death trap cooldown reduction increased. Okay, so the death trap cooldown reduction increased is pretty nice. The rapid fire duration increase is pretty nice. Other than that, maybe the cold imbue lucky hit chance increased. The methodical dash maximum cooldown is nice if you're going to run that. Overall, these buffs don't really say too much, but I guess we'll have to see about some other future things, especially with the aspects here. Victimized lucky hit chance increase. Siphoning Strikes now requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. No! Siphoning Strikes is like the most important passive on all Rogue builds, and now it requires a lucky hit chance. That's brutal. That is brutal. The way I read this is like you need a 75% chance. Like you have a lucky hit chance of 75%, I guess, which isn't that bad. It's like a 25% reduction in the passive. I guess I'll have to see how it's truly worded in the game because this is a little confusing. But rugged damage reduction against damage over time increased. Mending obscurity healing per second while stealth increased. Aftermath energy restored increased. Okay, energy restored from Aftermath is actually pretty nice. I do use that in quite a few of my builds. Combat Glyphs bonus damage now affects all damage instead of just core skills. Nice. Eldritch's Bounty Glyph legendary node and duration increased. That's also very nice. Preparation ultimate cooldown duration increased. That is also very nice. I've tried Preparation. It's very nice in some builds. Aspect of Volatile Shadows increased. Icy Alchemist aspect chill increased. Shadow Slicer aspect damage increased. All of these don't really seem too important. Toxic Alchemist damage increased. Vengeful aspect lucky hit chance increased. That's pretty nice. Aspect of Imitating Imbuement duration increased. That's pretty nice for the Shadow Clone. I very much like that. Aspect of Stolen Vigor healing increased. Lethal Dusk life on kill duration. Aspect of Noxious Ice bonus damage increased. And Menace dodge chance increased. Sky Hunter's energy gained increased, and Grasp of Shadow lucky hit chance increased. So basically full-on buff for the Rogue. The exception to that is the Siphoning Strikes nerf. So based on how this is rolled out, pretty nice overall for the rogue. I'm really curious to see rapid fire. That's the build I'm going to go towards right now. But more importantly than that, I really like the legendary node on the Eldritch Bounty being increased and the preparation reduction in cooldown for your ultimate is pretty nice, especially with Shadow Clone, Death Trap, those types of things. I could see this being a pretty nice season for the rogue. I already thought the rogue was reasonably strong, probably the third best class approaching endgame, and this doesn't really change much, I would say. So pretty nice there. Pretty cool. I was worried the rogue was going to get big nerfs, but also I mentioned in a podcast I did recently that the rogue might go under the radar because of it not being absolutely disgustingly broken in the end game. And looks like I was pretty much correct. I think that the rogue's still going to be very good. I'm a little worried about the siphoning strikes, but we'll see how good that is. Sorcerer, the final class, probably the one that needed the most help along with the Necromancer, although at least the Necromancer had the Bone Spear build, so we'll see. Enhanced charge bolt damage increased and now benefits from skill ranks. Oh, wow. It wasn't benefiting from skill ranks. That's kind of unfortunate, but that's actually really nice. It's a big buff to charge bolts. Destructive charge bolts damage reduction increased. Wow. Destructive incinerate damage reduction increased. Incinerate buffs are a meme. Ice Blade cast cleanup has been tightened, allowing players to cast after it's cast sooner. Act after it's cast sooner, rather. Fireball initial damage increased. Okay. Wizard's Firewall maximum mana regeneration increased. Wizard's Blizzard core skill mana cost reduction increased. And Supreme Deep Freeze cooldown reduction increased. Wow. So a big ultimate buff here for Deep Freeze. As well as charged bolts. Charged bolts getting massively buffed here. And I've already seen some pretty interesting things with charged bolts. That might be the go-to build if the buffs are big enough. And that is a pretty significant buff for enhanced charged bolts and destructive charged bolts. Getting extra 5% damage reduction and a 6% increase, which ends up being like, what is that? A 25% increase overall for both of those. That's pretty nice. Elemental Dominance now affects mastery skills instead of just core skills. Potent Warding duration, protection duration increased. Both these increased. Align the elements damage reduction per second increased. Okay, so they nerfed that super hard, and now they're buffing it again. Yeah, they overcorrected Align the elements. Mana Shield damage reduction increased. Okay, that's really nice. Devouring Blaze, bonus critical strike damage reduced. Little unfortunate, it's a big critical strike damage reduction, 9% there. Devouring Blaze, bonus critical strike damage to immobilize, reduced from 75% to 30%. Whoa, that's a hard nerf to Sorcerer, guys. Wow. The Firebolt kind of Ice Shards combination where you hit immobilized targets. Basically, you wanted to CC someone once you did with like Frost Nova, you basically one-shot them. Now you're going to get a reduction in critical strike damage from 75% to 30%. That is a huge nerf. Huge nerf. Wow. Fiery Surge mana regeneration increased. Destruction Glyph now affects all damage. Okay, enchantments, Spark enchantment chance to inform increased, correctly energy increased, Frozen Orb enchantment chance to cast increased, Incinerate enchantment cooldown reduced, Hydra enchantment mana threshold reduced from 300 to 200. Okay, I like the Frozen Orb enchantment and the Hydra enchantment buffs. I don't know if they're good enough to replace Firebolt. I guess Firebolt is like going to be a go-to still, assuming they don't nerf it a lot. But, you know, maybe it's a secondary slot in. Aspect of efficiency, mana cost reduction increased, and now also affects mastery skills. That's really nice. Aspect of Armageddon damage increased. Aspect of Shatter Stars damage increased. These base damage ones, I don't really see being very useful normally here. Serpentine aspect, Hydra duration. Glacial aspect, Ice Spikes damage bonus to Frozen reduced. That's unfortunate. Glacial aspect, Ice Spikes damage increased. Aspect of the Frozen Tundra, Ice Spikes damage increased. Aspect of the Frozen Wake, Ice Spike damage increased. These are very nice Ice Spike damage bonuses, so it was really nice. Aspect of Biting Cold, chance to apply vulnerable to frozen enemies increased. Okay, that's a pretty nice buff as well. Encased aspect, life and mana restore per second increased. Stable aspect, chance for a free cast. Aspect of Splintering Energy, chance to spawn additional Lightning Spear. Big buff here, although I don't think Lightning Spear is good at all. Aspect of Unbroken Tether, chance for additional chain lightning chains increased. Gloves of the Illuminator Fireball damage reduction reduced. Isu's Heirloom critical strike chance for movement speed increased. and Isidore's overflowing cameo chance releasing Lightning Nova increased. Okay, so I think Sorcerer got a big FU over any other class. They got a big nerf to a lot of their critical strike damage. I don't think their buffs are big enough to really see a build really shine. Yeah. All right, so overall theme of the patch, guys. Overall thoughts here. They really hard nerfed a lot of damage in the game. I would say Necromancer and Sorcerer got the biggest nerfs. Druid actually didn't really get a ton of nerfs, which I'm kind of surprised about compared to Necromancer and Sorcerer. Like, I think the problem they're having is that they don't like seeing people one-shot things, and Necromancer and Sorcerer do that when they're farming, and Necromancer particularly was really good and actually did clear like tier 100s. They also don't like bugs, which, to be fair, I don't either, so they fixed the Barbarian. But I think Druid and Barb are still going to be on top. I think Necromancer's build is still going to be good. I think Bone Spear is still going to be on top, but just significantly nerfed. And I'm really sad to see Sorcerer just get massively screwed over like that, I would say. But Rogue, not really touched. Siphoning Strikes, so our survivability gets decreased. But I don't know if it's going to be a big one, a big decrease. I'll have to see, because we still get benefit from a lot of the stats. But overall, that's probably the biggest nerf in the game, is the fact that they reduced all damage reduction, and they reduced our damage reduction aspects, and they reduced our vulnerable damage and basically all damage in the game. Like, how is this even like a thing? Reduction, like, this is big nerfs. Like, this is huge. These are huge, right? This is big. All of this stuff is just a massive nerf to every class in the game. Ooh, playing hardcore is going to be real rough now, I would say. Yikes, does this change things for me? Maybe. Kind of makes me want to test out a few things before I dive into hardcore, because these are brutal changes. Well, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I actually, overall, in the long term, think that this is kind of going to be better for the more hardcore player base. But for the casual players, I think this is a big downside. I don't think the casual players were worried about one-shotting things. I don't think that they were worried about not being being unkillable. They actually were struggling oftentimes, and they found the game a little bit boring, and there was like no content. And now they just have to grind even harder to get to the point where they have no content, because they're still just grinding up stats. I don't know how I feel about that. I know they don't want their game to be easily beaten, but they're reducing XP. They're reducing damage reduction. They're reducing damage. They're basically they claim that this season was going to be easy, better leveling, but that's not true. It's just not true. They reduce the level XP that you get, and they reduce the ability to farm quicker because they're reducing damage. And they're reducing the survivability, which means they're reducing the ability to jump into World Tier 4 faster. They reduce the ability to power level. Assuming Nightmare Dungeons don't work, then they basically gutted that entirely. I assume Nightmare Dungeons are working, so maybe it's not as bad as I think. But there's a lot of things in this game that make Season 1 seem like not as hype in terms of like damage and like just blasting and having fun. It's more of like going to be a grindy, slower paced game, which will be fun, I will say, for someone like myself. But I'm speaking from like a perspective of like the casual players, and I think this is probably not the way they wanted to go for casual players. However, there still is the whole new seasonal mechanics with the hearts and such that could change things a lot. So maybe that's going to be a big difference, and that's why they reduced everything. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt. So overall, I would say that I'm excited for the new aspects, although I don't think they're big aspects. I'm also excited to kind of jump into the game and experiment with all the different new buffs and changes, especially for the Rogue. The Rogue probably got the best of all worlds here. And I'm excited to see all the new changes, to see how survivable we are and how much less damage we're doing. All these changes are in effect right now, so I'll be showcasing them in videos later today. Sub if you want to see those, and I'll see you all for the next one.